right? In Georgian supras, Georgian dinners, it's tradition that the first dose is always to God. So that's what I will do. I'll toast to God. And in Georgian, you pronounce that as gamajos. So gamajos. Gamajos.
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Hello, this is Burn Power, the Anadromist, coming to you from Snow, Georgia. No, not the Southern American state Georgia, but in the country of Georgia, and Snow, SNO, is actually a place. And with me, I've got
Jill, Teddy,
Gustavs,
Simon,
Peter,
Luke.
And these guys have joined me for what I've been calling a gathering in Georgia. And I invited, it was an open call to up to 13 people. I'm kind of glad, and I think we all are kind of glad it wasn't a full 13. I think that would have been a little more chaotic, but nevertheless. But these are the guys who answered the call. And we've had a very interesting 2 weeks if you include Teddy and Peter coming early, but basically about 9-10 days with the rest of them. And Teddy was the first one who came. He arrived about a week early, and I'm going to let him tell you what his impressions of coming to Georgia and what it's been like. And also, since Peter came the next day, we'll go between the two of them.
Yeah, so I arrived early in order to spend more time with Bern, because I felt that I will be overcrowded by the others. So I thought, I'm going to do a few days before, which was great, because then I had to spend more time in Georgia and experience it as kind of a touristy before the gathering started. So we walked through the city. The first day I was alone because Peter was in a monastery, and he will tell you about it in a second. But so the first day I was on my own, and I got the experience of the Georgia a little bit different. So my sense was that it's similar to Israel, where I'm from, but in the 90s. So it's kind of still behind the times. Especially the youth are much more vibrant and more responsive to one another in the interaction with one another, and it was very refreshing and was very interesting to see that kind of element, and that I kind of missed. Also, the city is very beautiful. It's remind me of cities in Russia, because it was kind of the one of the cities of the empire, Russian Empire. And I spent just a few days doing certain stuff. Went to a museum, went to a church on Sunday, and looked at how the Georgians coming with the families, and that was a completely different experience from what I had in Germany last year, when I entered and the church was empty. And here you're coming and the church are full with kids, and the dad is putting the clothes of the singers for the church. It was such a wholesome family activity inside that it was, it was touching, very, really touching. And the few days that I spent with Bern and a few of his friends was very interesting. I haven't expected that it will influence me that strongly. So this was my first 5 days, and when everybody gathered, it's changed.
When Teddy, and we'll talk to Peter in a moment, came, I think it was somewhere either in Tbilisi is having a little bit of a cold going around, or someone brought it, who knows. But I got sick for a couple of days with the bug that then seemed to travel around. Although I don't think you got it from me directly. You could have gotten it from any number of places.
Yeah, it was after the Georgians. No, it was before we meet the Georgians.
Yeah. But so that gave them a couple of days on their own to explore. And Peter, why don't you talk about your coming here and some of your explorations and your Iranian friend and all of that.
Yeah, so I have an Iranian friend who lives in Tbilisi, which is also why I went a few days earlier. He's a very interesting character. I'm sure that he can give you a much more colorful description of him than I can. I hope he will. So the first day I had no expectations, but he told me to meet somewhere. And of course, in Georgia time, the driver was an hour, 2 hours late. Was prepared for that. And he told me that we're going to a monastery. And we went there, had a wonderful meal. And also totally unexpectedly, they invited me to stay for the night, which I did. It's a really wonderful experience. In the first place, it's a good spiritual practice of focusing your attention. But it was also very interesting to be there. I think I was the first foreigner there who's been there in like 10 years. And there's only one monk who spoke English, but nonetheless we could communicate quite well. Wonderful experience.
And then you both ended up in Mtskheta.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was unexpected as well. So we also waited for our Iranian friend, who is he always in the mood. He was such a delighted person because he's very young, he's 20, and he's very excited about everything. So he almost like a puppy running around himself and just enjoying life. It was fun for the but at the beginning I got tired of it eventually and started making fun of him, which he kind of received with grace. So it's also kind of nice. So he came. We met him, and then the driver, his godfather, came with the car, and he parked for a few minutes.
He was 2 hours late, by the way.
Oh, yeah, he was 2 hours late, of course. And he parked with his car, and somebody blocked the car. And then we waited until somebody that went to his job will come down, will unpark the car, and it took another 2 hours, something like that. So overall, we sat in this coffee shop and waited for 4 hours to go to Mtskheta.
And I exchanged belts with my Iranian friend. So I have a wonderful new, stylish new belt, which I received from him.
And we traveled to Mtskheta, and we seen 3 churches. One is an old ruined church. No, it wasn't. It was functioning. It on top of the mountain that you see beautifully all the valley. And 2 at the bottom. One of them is the burial place of all the Georgian saints. And the other is the church where the tunic of Jesus Christ was taken after the crucifixion, and it's still there. And the churches are completely different and unique in their own way. I especially love the last one, the tunic church, because it's a church from the 4th century, and they have a huge wall around it, and it looks like a fortress that protects from some people to come in. And the church itself was huge, with a huge fresco of Jesus Christ, and you see it from kind of afar when you enter this church, kind of stretching long and along, and you see it in the other side of the wall, and it's just breathtaking. Although we saw it in the night and we kind of couldn't absorb it as well, the outside of it and all the different layers and the different stone carvings that was on the other side, it was probably one of the beautiful old churches that I've seen in my life. It was spectacular. So I thank you, Peter, and your Iranian friend that you convinced me to go to such a journey.
The next person to arrive was Simon, and he didn't arrive that much. He arrived a day earlier. Why don't you give us your impressions, including you know some of your time when the other people arrived, but your initial impressions of Georgia? And you wanted to see Georgia long before you came here.
Yeah. So as somebody who grew up in Ukraine and has a lot of Soviet history behind him, Georgia was always this mythical place that people would go on vacations, and the people were fascinating and welcoming, and the wine flowed freely, and people danced in the streets and sung, and it was this completely mythical place that I really wanted to see at some point. And I respect the Georgian people a lot, and so this was something I was looking forward to for a while. As a coincidence, my flight got changed, and so I arrived a day early, which was convenient because I was able to get some sleep, unlike the rest of folks who were arriving the next day. And the first thing that struck me when I arrived at the airport is that how many families were welcoming their relatives who were returning back to Tbilisi. That's a custom that used to be more common, at least in the US, and I haven't seen such a crowd of people in a while. And it was very heartwarming, and it was lovely to see that people valued their relatives, and they valued them enough to come to the airport and meet them. So that was my first impression. And then on Bern's advice, I took the bus to get to the Airbnb that I was sharing with Peter and Teddy, and they saved a room for me. So thank you very much. They had to one of them had to sleep on the couch, and I had a room all to myself, which was great. But yeah, that I was really surprised how good the bus system is. I was really surprised how easy it was to get around the city, and that those were my impressions before the trip started. In general, though, I think these have been some of the most concentrated days that I remember in a long time. It feels like a month has passed at least, maybe two. It's really hard to capture this time in just a couple of words. But the things that stood out the most to me, I think, are the dinner we had together with Bern's Georgian friends. I think that was a massive highlight for me. One thing I was looking forward to is actually meeting Georgians, not just in a transactional setting where we were purchasing something in the Bazaar, which was also great, but meeting everyone from a ballet dancer to a Heidegger scholar, right? We have an incredible range of people, and meeting these people and actually talking about what their day-to-day life looked like, and what they were interested in, and what they were studying, and what they were looking forward to, and sharing some of our own thoughts was incredibly important.
We're going to come back to that because I think we all have impressions of that night. We're going to keep coming. Gustavs, coming from Latvia, you were the next in line. And the next three, I think their experience was very different of arrival here. Why don't you start?
Yeah, so I arrived very early in the morning. I had an overnight flight, sort of overnight. I arrived at 4 a.m. First impressions, airport wasn't that big. The language, like the letters, the script, completely different, which makes a big difference. Also in the airport, same thing as Simon said about the families waiting for the relatives to come home. They had these big banners, posters.
4 a.m.
Yeah, exactly, at 4 a.m. And also that there were lots of Muslim travelers, and that a lot of the, the traffic comes from, Azerbaijan, Turkey, the Middle East, and also lots of women in hijabs and stuff, which definitely put me a little bit, you immediately see that this is a different country. They have these neighbors, that's the kind of space they live in. And so yeah, my next first impression was that flights are delayed, which is, I guess, typical, but maybe I immediately stereotyped because it was from Turkey, and it's like, oh yeah, Turkish flight's delayed, not a surprise. Yeah, and then just early morning, met Bern really early, took a taxi to the city. Got to get some breakfast, different food completely, and kind of from there just got to see people, got to see the Georgians in their public setting, like on the streets, in shops and so on, and that was interesting because that's how I've really got to interact with most Georgians, is just in their most public behavior. Yeah.
Jill, why don't you go next? Jill is from the Ticino, the Italian part of Switzerland.
Yeah, so I and Luke arrived around about 7, if I don't remember correctly.
7:30.
Yeah, because both our flights got delayed by quite a while. So we arrived and I bought rapidly an a SIM card because I forgot to buy it, the eSIM back in my home country, but then burned off those taxi drivers. So
Right.
we found him. I did annoy him quite a bit because I needed still to do some stuff at the airport, but he was a really calm person. So then we walked down to the car. He didn't turn on, so
it wouldn't start.
Yeah, this is the thing I didn't hear from you. I got a message from you later saying because we were waiting for you to come, and we went outside in front of near my house to wait. We thought they would be there any minute, and it just kept going on. But I didn't see the note from you saying your taxi had kind of broken down.
Right.
What had happened?
Yeah, there was some problem with the battery, I do believe, because it was in a hybrid car. So it the taxi driver was very apologetic, told us help would be there in 10-15 minutes, which was actually the case. So some guy arrived, turned the car on, then we got in and went straight to Tbilisi, and so we arrived at Bern around about 8 in the morning. I completely sleep deprived.
Yeah, they were so tired. Why don't you explain your feeling about arriving?
Well, we before we arrived, we met up in Istanbul because we realized both our flights were delayed, so we got the same plane. So we had a little conversation in the airport, and then when we arrived, we met back up and found the taxi driver, but we weren't sure if he was the right guy or not because the sign that had our names on it was sitting kind of on this glass thing, and then he came up and picked it up and he's like, yes, that's me. So then I think we texted Gustav's, and we were asking him if he knew Bern or what his name was, and then somehow or another we figured out it was the right guy. And then when we got to the car, it wouldn't start, so then he went to the back and he started banging on the battery with a wrench to try to make the battery start. So he did that for about 5-10 minutes, and then he said he was swearing in Georgian, and then he got out and got on the phone and he said 10-15 minutes, and then the mechanic or repairman, he came and fixed the battery and started it up.
Yeah, the funny thing was, like, the trunk wouldn't open, so he...
Yeah, so he had to crawl in through the front,
Yeah, he took out all our luggage and then squeezed himself in and just started.
And for a moment, his shorts were falling down, or his jeans, they were falling down while he was banging on the battery and swearing in Georgian.
Oh, that's good.
On the way over, he almost ran out of gas. But then it started running off the battery, which was kind of sketchy because the battery wouldn't start to begin with. But he never stopped to get gas, he just kept going. And he got a call from, I think, his wife, because he had a wedding ring. And then she was mad at him, and then he just hung the phone up. And then he took out a cigarette and started smoking, and he rolled the window down.
By the way, Luke is from Mississippi, which makes him easily the most exotic person in Georgia, probably, because no one's ever seen anyone from Mississippi.
Right.
So we then, we'll skip to Erisioni next, because we got together. We had to go to Erisioni around noon, which means these three guys didn't get any sleep at all. And so they were, fortunately, I think Erisioni kept them awake and interested in. Any of you, since we all went there, why don't you explain your impressions of Erisioni? And Erisioni is very important Georgian dance and music troupe.
So first thing is just incredibly impressive dancing. Just I can't even compare with anything else because it seemed flawless, and even the flaws were sort of intentional, like they were maybe sometimes not stomping their feet so hard because it's just practice. But that if they do it for real, like they could stomp, probably break the stage. Just very, very impressive, and also it was practice. It wasn't the full performance. So we got to see the dancers in their natural habitat and their behavior. How they're friendly, stretching, that kind of stuff, and it's definitely a very special, unique sneak peek into the Erisioni troupe.
The contrast between the men and the women was very pronounced as well. The women were very graceful, where if you watch their shoulders, they didn't move a millimeter up or down. They were completely straight, incredibly. Like if you could imagine them carrying a heavy object on their head and not dropping it, right? And the men were incredibly athletic. They would do these somersaults. At some points, it looked like it looked more like gymnastics than dance. It was incredibly athletic and then very, very impressive to watch.
Yeah, at certain point it looked like gravity was going by the wayside. Just how much some guys were in the air. Yeah.
Yeah, Georgia really seems invincible. At least they're the spirit, the nation. If you see this.
Okay, so next we got these guys home, put them to sleep for a few hours, and then we went and, as Teddy said, gluttonously ate Georgian cuisine at this very Georgian restaurant whose name escapes me, but I will put it right here because it's one of those names even I have trouble remembering. But why don't you describe, I don't know if this was your first experience with Georgian food, but it was certainly your first experience here with a Georgian restaurant.
It was my first experience with Georgian food. It was very hands-on eating. That's all I have right now.
Yeah, the eating itself is also an art. It's not just the food, but the way you have to eat it is
yeah, they have the khinkali,
tricks,
which is like a dumpling, but you turn it upside down and suck the juices out of it.
Right.
I also learned you weren't supposed to eat the knot.
Yeah.
I did not know this.
Yeah, the knot that the dumpling is made. I'll show a picture here.
Yeah, the other thing is they needed some time to come with the food, but yeah, the food was excellent. Yeah,
Delicious.
Yeah, I'll say that for me it was a familiar scenery, and actually I have to say Bern pick up excellent place because it's not the touristy place, it's the family that goes to those places, and you actually saw so every single table has a certain kind of private space with a certain pagoda, which kind of like the kind of barriers between you and the other hall. And I found it very familiar to me about how the Israeli Arabs will go to those kind of places, and the Israelis in general also go to Abu Ghosh or something, and you come and they will make you some meat, and there's a bunch of families that goes to those places. It looks to me very familiar. I'll guess it's very Turkish kind of culture that maybe also seeped into Georgia and maybe to Israel as well. So this is kind of what seems to me very, very familiar in that. But the place was very warm and inviting, and that was just excellent.
And we had a good quantity of wine.
And to top things off, we had the fantastic tarhun, which is a Georgian soda made out of, I don't know what, but it has a...
Tarragon.
Estragon.
Yeah.
It has a very, very bright green color. Delicious.
Yeah. And so then the day ended pretty early, but you kept going, didn't you? You hadn't been to sleep.
Yeah.
I left to go home because I had been up since, 4 in the morning or so, monitoring their progress. But they, I guess, were too excited and just kept staying out. And Why?
I mean, I'm not in Georgia, that frequently. Like, I've never been here, so I just want to make the most of the experience, get to know everyone, and I don't think I lost anything by not sleeping at all. Like,
Eventually you went to bed.
Eventually.
Yeah. So, what was the next day? So it was, let's see. Oh, okay. I let everyone wake up a bit late, and then we walked down to a restaurant. We walked down Palishvili Street to a restaurant, Alt House, which is a tea shop. And at that point, we had a different kind of Georgian food, a little more artistic, would you say? What would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some mashup of different cuisines.
Yeah.
But with a Georgian take on all.
Right. And I think that was quite good. I don't think anyone probably has a lot to say about that, apart from the fact it was satisfying.
Yeah, also like the place was really scenic. Like I don't know how to explain it exactly because the words in English and they don't come to me properly. But it's like the whole how the room was decorated and so on was really nice. Was really local and.
Fantastic tea selection as well.
Yeah, the tea
Yeah, tea was great. There's a lot of students who were just sitting there studying, so you kind of saw that this is an inviting environment, especially for the young Georgians to spend their time in. So it was kind of nice. And we waited a lot of time until our food will arrive, which gave us the appreciation of the room.
Spoiler alert, when we get to our favorite restaurant, they brought the food really early, which really made Teddy super happy. But we're going to save that as a cliffhanger.
I think in the Alt House we also found it really funny that they were playing American country music.
Yes.
Yeah.
So from the Alt House, we walked over to the Dry Bridge, which is essentially an outdoor, I don't know, in English, in America we call it a flea market, a garage sale, or a swap meet. What would you call it?
Yeah, flea market. Yeah.
And what did you think of the stuff? What was going on there? What did you think of that? Any thoughts?
I thought there was lots of old Soviet stuff that I could recognize kind of being from Latvia. I was like walking along and I'm like, those glasses, they're nice. They're sort of like those little wine shot glasses, liqueur glasses. Like, I've seen those before. They're pretty, but it's sort of one of those things that was maybe manufactured somewhere in the Soviet Union and then everyone got it because there's this one factory.
Yeah, lots of military Soviet stuff as well.
Yeah.
Military decorations. I think I also saw an SS helmet somewhere. A lot of knives, sables, cool stuff.
Art paintings. I actually wanted to make a point about the Soviets in Georgia, but maybe not the Soviets as they are known right now, is the Russians. There's a lot of Russians, and you can just see them so very easily. And basically what I've done is basically looking for Tel Avivis. If I look for Tel Avivis, they're probably Russians. And if I recognize, like, oh, this looks like somebody who I know from Tel Aviv, there's probably Russians. They're distinct in the way that they dress, in the way that they kind of present themselves. They're very noticeable, and there's a lot of them. And the good thing is that they opened a lot of businesses here, so you can approach a lot of businesses and start speaking Russian and they'll understand you. The old people in Georgia know Russian pretty well, so right now in snow there's a lot of old people, and me and Simon are speaking Russian, so we're able to communicate with them. In Tbilisi it was more difficult. Most of the young people don't know at all. Probably they know English, and have dreams of immigrating to certain American or closer to those kind of European countries. With one girl in a coffee shop, the barista that I spoke with, she had a dream of studying in Italy architecture. It's like, why? You have such a beautiful city here. It's like, no, but Italy.
That's not bad.
Yeah. The presence of Russians was very noticeable, and I think especially after the Bazaar when we went to Tbilisoba.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, from the Dry Bridge, we went. They're having the city celebration holiday, which lasts for a couple of days, Tbilisoba, but what we mostly saw was in this one park, lots of loud Georgian pop music being played by people live on the stage. I didn't go up there. Did any of you? No, of course you didn't.
Careful.
If it had been, by the way, Georgians, if that had been traditional music, we would have been there. So, I've been up on the stage. But it's your country. You do what you want. So, but we also went around looking for shashlik or shish kebab, as some people might know it. And I looked for a friend that I couldn't find, but any reflections on... It was really, really packed with people everywhere you went. Thoughts?
I think it was a festival like you can find in many cities, but it was interesting to see how Georgians spend their time on their weekends, right? I think there was a Sunday, right? Yeah, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It was nice to see families out enjoying the festival. But I think it could have been pretty much any place in Europe or Asia, more or less.
We kind of were disappointed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were expecting something that wouldn't be like any other place, like any other festival, any other food that you could find in any other Western city. And for me, like, yeah, okay, I've seen those places. The biggest problems is hard to find a restroom, and there's a lot of people. So, yeah.
There was only one difference. There was a lot of wine options.
A lot.
So if you like wine, there were plenty of options for you. It's not just beer and all that stuff. So
And then we wandered around till we got to the ballet. The Georgi Aleksidze Ballet Company was putting on a show of the choreography of the late Georgi Aleksidze, some of his most important pieces. It was something I had seen before, but I figured this would be an excellent introduction to another side of Georgian culture for us. And now, for some of you, I know for Luke, this was first time watching any kind of ballet.
First time.
So others had different. I think Teddy's seen his share. So and we're in between. So, what are your thoughts?
I thought it was, beautiful ballet. One of my kind of main, conclusions or points that really struck me was that the ballet, so in the program, there were, like, a lot of it was very explicitly Christian, religious, which is something that I don't see very often in this sort of, like, high art. Because from what I've seen, high art is typically a place that is explicitly secular in a way. It's like maybe it's postmodern and playing on religious elements.
Which was explicitly Christian?
Well, for example, one of the performances was named
Psalms.
One of it was Psalms, but another one was about Shoshanik, who is one of the great saints of Georgia.
All right.
It's the martyrdom.
Yeah, it's the martyrdom of Shoshanik. Pronounced wrong, probably. But high art is generally a place where I don't see that kind of genuine stuff.
Low.
Yeah, and even the way that they were presenting certain ideas, they were looking at it from a Christian viewpoint about the, I guess, the negatives of certain things, like with insanes, as they were called on the.
There was the first dance was you had a woman dressed in black, a woman dressed in white, and then there was a man, and they were having kind of a back and forth between them. But there were these white figures called the Insanes, which is probably some strange mistranslation because we would never use that phrase that way. We would call them the crazies or the insane people or something. But you could see that their relationship problems were driving them insane.
Right.
Not that it was that explicit, I mean, if you didn't know, first time I watched that, I didn't know who those were,
Right.
and I just kind of took it in a sort of a different way. But
Right. Well, it kind of seemed like it was showing the consequences of those kinds of relationship issues or getting into relationships the wrong way.
yeah,
I want to make to discuss something, or maybe make a point, because I was blown away by that performance. Because, as Gustav mentioned, I haven't seen religious elements that is connected to ballet, and ballet has a very, at least in sexual settings, a very sexual element to it. And I didn't know how to put the two together in my mind. They just completely were different worlds that not should be mixed, water and oil, something like that. And I was puzzled by it. So I will summarize my conversation with Miriam.
this was the next night.
The next night, I'll summarize it because I will talk about the Georgians in general, but I'll summarize kind of my conversation with the main ballerina of that performance, which is a religious person, and she's a devoted Christian. And we talked about that performance and how she is solving that puzzle. And basically her reply to me was that she works through the religious elements of what is allowed and what is not. And as long as the performance is associated towards God and associated towards the divine or something the highest, there's no problem in it, despite the sexual elements. But she told me a really interesting story when she performed all over the world, and one of the times she needed to perform in Germany, in a Protestant church, and they asked her to perform that piece and their ensemble in that place. And she said, I had a problem. I had a problem because I would never do it in a church in Georgia. But when a different, almost Christian denomination will ask me to do it in their place, I felt as I was coming there desecrating something that I'm not supposed to do. And we discussed this kind of struggle that she had in doing that, and she's like, well, I'm still like, I've been flown in, I still need to do the performance. I done the performance, but I felt it wasn't right. And her way that she dealt with the situation was to then return, speak with her priest, kind of going through that, and maybe reflect about this kind of relationship, about what happened in this occurrence. So in Georgian mind, as I understand, there's also this kind of the separation of the holy and the unholy. And the ballet itself, there has an element of unholiness, but it's, as an art performance, it still can show towards the highest, right? And this is kind of a summary of my conversation with her. Yeah.
I would say not so much holy and unholy as holy and secular.
And secular, thank you.
Because unholy sounds like some death metal band or something. So, any other thoughts about the performance before we move on?
We met together.
Sunday, right. So, some of you went to church services. What was your thoughts?
Well, we went there. It was full of people, and so whole families of Georgians were there present. It was there was kind of the problem that there was this marathon that was starting just vis-a-vis towards the main entrance of the church. So every time somebody opened the door, and it was opened often because it was full of people. We heard like some music of just the commercial music that we are actually kind of trying to escape here during the church service. But
is that outside?
It was outside, yeah. I had the image of like a besieged city. This is the large church, lost church service, while the barbarians were on the city gates making noise and shouting.
Fighting with sound.
Exactly, yeah. That's the image I got.
Yeah, I tried to concentrate on the service, and
it was a very good practice. Yeah.
Well, we've got at least 3 people here who are very interested, and to differing degrees, some very seriously, in Orthodox Christianity. And this would be a good time to just explain some of your feelings about Orthodox Christianity in Georgia, the Georgian Orthodox Church. What was your feelings about the different places you've been and people you've met?
To be quite honest, I've not had this much relationship with the clergy. So, but yeah, also with the girls, the day after, like a meeting at your place, I didn't talk that much about religion, so I don't have that much an opinion about it. But you see, it's more incorporated into daily life, like also in the ballet, because there was some element of sensuality that the Georgian culture, and I do believe on some level, Orthodoxy doesn't exclude that much as perhaps Puritanism did. So, yeah, that is my general observation, but I wouldn't go any further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not Orthodox Christian. I have a lot of respect for it. However, and I think my conclusions are that Georgia has a very, very deep level of Christianity in the national identity in a way that I haven't seen elsewhere before, not in the same way. And it's interesting to me because there's a lot of conversations going around about the separation of church and state and analyzing the Christian heritage and origins of national identity in other places. And yeah, just thoughts about that they have a very different story than I think most places in Europe or the US. Yeah. So it's a lot more integrated and inseparable, and the people understand that, I think, generally. Yeah, I agree. The country itself is just steeped into Orthodoxy. When you're on the bus, you see people making a cross when the bus passes the church, for example. And there's donation boxes for churches throughout the country, everywhere. Every hilltop, every mountaintop is crowned by a crucifix. But it's not. I don't know the country very well, so I don't know about like the downsides of mixing politics and church. I'm not familiar with the situation in Georgia in that regard. When I was at the monastery, there does seem to be a bit of a problem that they have not really had any interactions with other Christians who are not Orthodox. So I think most Orthodox people, they insist that everybody who's not Orthodox goes to hell, which I have not really formed my opinion about yet. So maybe some more contact with outside Christians might be fruitful in this country. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was interesting. I was looking through the picture gallery on my phone of the photos I've taken, and I realized that pretty much every second one at least has a cross in it in some shape or form. And maybe if I had those sorts of pictures in any other country, it would be like I was seeking out those churches, monasteries deliberately, like on a very pilgrimage type journey. And this isn't that at all. A pilgrimage would be very, very different. But they just have those crucifixes, on every mountaintop, on all the nice places, all the old buildings. They all have shrines. They have shrines everywhere.
Every door, almost every front door has a sticker with a church.
And while you were here in snow, you were climbing up the sides of, just a random hill, and there's shrines and crosses and.
Even ruined churches that you have here on top of the mountain. You enter inside and you will find a place for candle, some icon, maybe even a donation box.
Yeah, it's
And
ruined, but they're still
it's
using
ruined,
it.
but it's still using it.
Right.
Which is, Germans, what are you doing?
So, and later in that day, on Sunday, we went to the big bazaar, the Deserter Bazaar, and it's accompanying Bazroba. The Bazroba is where you sell everything but food. The bazaar here is for the food. This is a large, sprawling hive, maze, next to the old brutalist Soviet train station. Thoughts on the bazaar?
Yeah, the main station looked like it came out directly from some dystopian film or whatever. It has its own sort of charm in a way.
It was very deep into the ground. The escalator was really long.
Yeah, the subway, the metro.
Yeah, the metro.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes down, 2 minutes up. And it's very fast.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the food portion of the bazaar was very, very interesting as well. We got a chance to try everything. We got a chance to chat with the salespeople, and got a chance to have everyone try to sell their cheese to us, which was great. As we were passing, we got offers from every single one.
Yeah, I sent them down there on purpose. I said, "This is the gauntlet of cheese women."
Cheese. And I got a slice of cheese that was far too large, but we almost completed it. So good job, us. Yeah, it was great to experience that kind of culture again. I missed it.
And then we went and visited my friend Michiko at his restaurant at Mtatsminda, which is an old Soviet-era amusement park. And thoughts?
Yeah, it had its own really sort of charm because it wasn't like connected to some bigger franchise like Disneyland or whatever. So it had this whole homemade feel on some level. It was...
It's totally open as well. No entrance fees for the location.
No, we just walked in.
Great view.
The food was surprising.
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I was terrified.
The place we went to was a little place, Café de Orphée, something like that. And it's run by this man that I met a couple of years back, and I keep coming to this little restaurant, and people kind of look at me in Tbilisi, the Georgians, and I say, I'm going to a little restaurant in the amusement park. And they're like, what? And I said, yeah, it's really great. And these guys...
Like as someone who lives in New York City and visits a lot of restaurants, all of my negative alarm bells were going off. Going into an amusement park to eat dinner, I'm gonna eat hot dogs, terrible hot dogs, and corn dogs, and bad hamburgers, and pretend salad. Is that the food?
And the amusement park looks like a Soviet version of Googie architecture with weird faces and strange
little trolls.
cracked trolls and.
So my expectations were very low, and I was blown away by the quality of the food and the attention we got from the owner at the end as well, and the friendliness, and it was an outstanding meal. It was, I think, one of my two favorite meals here. I think I would keep them on the same level. We'll talk about the other one later.
We're coming to that. So.
I think this is one of the points where I really, the impression solidified that the Georgian way of ordering food and sharing food is very different, because they don't do this one person, one portion type thing a lot. There's a lot of sharing. We order salad and you get salad and it's like too much for one person, but it's, you just share it around. And I think we realized that we have our own confusion about it as well, like as a group. We
ჩემი ხმა მესმის მოგუდული რას უნდა მთხოვდეს ძაღლივით გარეთ აძაგძაგებს ქარი და ინვა შემოდი ჩემში მაგრამ ვეჭო შენი დავა.
That was the intermission. Meanwhile, back in Tbilisi, Georgia, it was Monday afternoon. I think I gave everyone Monday morning free to do whatever. I don't know. We won't discuss it It was private. And we went to see my friends who have a shadow puppet theater called Budrugana Gagra. And that was, I think, something different for all of you. They do hand shadows, not just shadow puppets. And they do abstract hand shadows and they do various animals. And so we got there in time to watch them. They had actually prepared a couple of things to show us. And they turned the lights off, and then we watched the screen and their hands. And thoughts about that early afternoon?
It's really cool. No intellectual comments. Sorry.
It was great that they tried to teach us a few animal shapes. That was probably the most fun part. I thought the water that they did with their hands, was really smooth in a way that I wasn't expecting. Like, it seemed more real than a cartoon, but also two-dimensional because it's a shadow. It was very interesting.
Yeah, it's like totally analog. There was no pixels and no frames per second. It was totally real.
Organic and so on. So, yeah.
Yeah, me and Simon managed to speak with one of the puppeteers because he spoke Russian pretty well.
Yeah, someone I haven't been able to. My friend
Yes.
Yuri, and I haven't been able to spend much time. Zuri, sorry.
Zuri.
Yeah, that I haven't spent much time with. But you guys were blessed.
And I have to say a few things about it. First of all, I describe it as a ballet with hands, because those guys spend hours. Some of them said 7 hours as training a day for different stuff, because every single person has also one character, because you learn how to do the rabbit or the bear, and it's really tough to teach. You kind of need to know. And the problem is, it's not just you have that kind of reflection, you have kind of a three-dimensional movement to it. So you need to know exactly how to position the hands, and it's really difficult for for a friend to show you how to do that. You kind of need to discover it by your own. And it takes a lot of time, and because it's shadows, as Peter pointed, you don't have the frame per second, or the element of every few frames you do the same kind of painting as you have in drawings and in cartoon. So the smoothness of it is as like 60 frames per second, right? As the guys who like first-person shooters. It's really smooth. You don't see any jumps, and it feels like it's capturing you much more when you're just looking at those kind of images. And the amount of work is tremendous. It's so, they need to put so much work just to be able to do that. Most of the artists are in their 40s, 50s, something like that, and they're doing it for 20, 30 years, and they have actually trouble finding new talent, because it's not a lot of money. They get money from the government, and they're not that tech savvy, so they don't know how to put their craft that well on the internet. But the problem is, it's also not telegraphing well to the digital. It's something that it's kind of,
that's the point, that it doesn't transfer to
yeah, that's actually the point. And it's a shame, because it's just so beautiful. It's breathtaking how they do it. And we haven't seen this whole show. We've seen fragments of certain stuff that I managed to do, and we still were amazed by that experiment. I wish they would find more young talent, more young actors who will be willing to put the time and effort to develop that skill. And I also wish that this theater could continue to operate, because now they're in the transition where their founder is really old. and nobody knows what will happen with the theater when he will die, and it will be a shame for everybody, not just people in Georgia, just for the whole humanity, if that small theater will disappear.
Yeah, it's a very unique kind of art form.
Very.
I think just to add that I had this thought about seeing this very technically minimalistic form of puppetry. It made me think and appreciate more just how much can be achieved if you actually go technically above that, if you make your own different kinds of marionettes and puppets. And that for them, they're very purist about how they don't use any additional sort of I don't know how to call them, but props, yeah, they don't use props. But if they did use props, they could make landscapes easily and things like that, but they don't. And so, just thoughts about that.
The only thing that they used was a ball for the head of one specific figure, and they don't do it very often. And they also had a little sword, but that's all that they did.
I thought the origin story of how the theater got started was very beautiful as well, because it was meant to bring a little bit of joy to people in remote villages in Georgia, and they have continued to do that, along with traveling all over the world and presenting this art to audiences everywhere from East Asia, from Japan to Europe. So it's a very honorable thing that they're doing, on top of being beautiful and talented as well. So,
The rest of the afternoon, we just kind of took off, and then we had our dinner and I gave everyone a chance to meet some Georgians and some of my very good friends here. And I think many people said that was one of the highlights of their time here. Why don't you? Well, I'll explain. We had a couple sisters, one of whom was in the ballet. We discussed another. A couple of them had been trained in art history. We had another person who was a furniture and, how would you describe it? Furniture and interior design kind of person.
Yep.
And then the quietest one of all was actually teaching physics at university. But then we had Lasha, who is a Heidegger scholar, and he's a very good friend of mine, and Sandro, who's more interested in political things. And then I throw these guys into the mix, and what did we get out of it? We heard Teddy, and Teddy was definitely, I think he was really happy, because he had talked to me afterwards, after the ballet, and he was just like, and then he had a chance to talk to her. They almost didn't come, the ballerina and her sister, but they came, and that was an excellent moment. So, what else do we think?
I think it was our first moment of engaging with Georgians directly, right? Outside of, I already mentioned this a little bit earlier, but outside of commercial or transactional kind of places or just random encounters, this was the first time I actually got to talk to people and understand how they lived and what they were interested in, what their lives looked like and what their ambitions were. And to me, that was easily the highlight of the trip. That was what I was looking for in Georgia, like connecting with the people here and understanding them a little bit, getting a little bit inside their head, and sharing maybe some of my own thoughts.
It's also interesting to see the perspective that Georgians had of the West. Because before that, I only had my Western perspective of Georgia, and it's like an interesting mirror, flipped version of what they had of us, and it probably made me appreciate what we have also a bit more. So I'm quite critical of the West, and they only see the good stuff and not really the bad stuff. It's very interesting conversations we had.
I think that they were among Georgians probably some of the most, I guess, not talkative but communicative, ready to talk, able to talk well. I thought they were very eager to talk with us, to kind of share perspectives, and it was just a very lovely evening. I was very lucky to have some good conversations. Yeah.
I talked to Lasha for a while about music and education and other things of that nature. And then I think Sophia and Miriam and all of them showed up, and I asked Sophia about the necklace that I got at the Dry Bridge, it was called. And she explained that it was the Musa, and we didn't know what that was. But then she looked it up and she translated over, and it's representative of the Muse. And there's a statue dedicated to this figure. I guess it's an important figure in Georgian culture, and it's in front of the Philharmonic Center. And at the same time, or the Philharmonic Center, at the same time, Simon was talking to her about something different, and I was a part of that conversation as well. And then at some point they started talking about programming, and she had done some stuff with HTML and CSS and those kinds of things. And we explained some of the programming stuff we've been doing over Zoom in this program called Tuple, which is a pair programming thing that we were working on. But it was an interesting night, and I talked to almost everybody, but not everybody, and they all had different perspectives on things.
I will comment one element that was shown, because after we had a separate conversation with everybody, they Bern kind of gathered us in a group and made us talk to each other in a group setting and kind of explore idea as a conversation, a group conversation. And what stand out was the fact that they almost not as appreciative of what they have in Georgia, and they kind of don't really understand what we see here, why Bern here, why this kind of interest, because they see themselves as somebody who is behind, a country that's left behind and trying to reach out and to be this kind of part of the European Union, part of this kind of Western ideals and so on. And they just don't see the cultural gold mine that they are sitting on. Well, they kind of don't see it. They kind of still, it's something that they are appreciative and they're really proud of, but they don't understand, like, this is the core. This is the core of their culture and for every culture. And maybe we in the West are losing that. And we are trying to kind of orient our minds in order to start seeing that in the cultures that we are each and every one of us associated. It was really funny because everywhere we went, and Bern was introducing us by the countries. So we was never by our names, Teddy, Jill, Luke. We're always like Switzerland, Israel, Mississippi, right? That kind of thing.
Always, saying Mississippi here is kind of like going to, I don't know, Ohio and talking about the country of Georgia. You know, it's that foreign to them.
Yeah, so this experience with talking with them and debating with them why we think Georgia is great, why they think Georgia is great, what is the future of their culture, our culture, and so on, was very interesting insight. But just in general, it was, and I will echo Simon, it was great speak with people who are from here. And I wish, despite the beauty of those mountains, I wish we had it more. I got to experience it a little bit more because my extended trip, but I wish just in general that we had this opportunity to do more.
It was hard enough to corral the Georgians. They're very busy all the time.
I know.
And so, the next morning, we took off for the mountains. And we did a lot of driving. I let Teddy drive for a stretch. And we ended up at, I would say, our favorite place in the whole trip. The Russian car museum.
Museum.
Yeah, a museum.
My friend.
Why don't you Russian speakers tell us what in the world he was
So
saying?
first of all, Bern found this guy on YouTube who was doing tours around Georgia, and he come across this museum of old cars, Russian
Not
cars.
just old cars. So you saw the car Kennedy was killed in.
Eva Braun's car, Beria's car.
Yes.
The Stalin was in this one once.
Yeah. A lot of old Russian cars, but not just. You also.
But when we say
American
old,
cars.
we mean they're rusting outside.
Yeah, there's no driving. They're all basically just the frame.
This
and
isn't a
maybe the
museum.
wheel.
It's a junkyard.
I love how the owner immediately pinpointed Bern as the one calling the shots and started to butter him up so that, we would spend more money in his place. So he instantly suggested some honey that he could sell. I'm sure he had lots of other goods he could provide. But it was a very quirky experience and probably worth its price in admission just for the story.
Let's say we got hustled. We got hustled.
He was a good hustler.
And it was Georgian hustle, and it was an experience. And
It was an enjoyable hustle.
It was appreciative.
And then shortly after that, I gave them all the first taste of their. We've got 1, 2, 3, maybe not flatlanders. People from flat places. You're from Brooklyn. That's not exactly a mountainous zone. Israel, you got some mountains, but they're pretty dry.
That's true.
But only Jill has serious mountains in his backyard somewhere. So then I started driving up this crazy hill mountain, and from then on we were in the greater Caucasus. We were no longer in the little foothills of the mountains. We were up in the mountains.
Are we returning through that place to Tbilisi? Is there like another way?
No, there's only one way.
No.
So let's break this down into different categories. We'll talk about Gergeti in a moment. We'll talk about. Here's what I wanted to start off talking about. Here's what I noticed is when I got here, some of our people here had what I would call sort of a mountain delirium.
Mountain fever.
Mountain fever. And they started just going into the mountains. Now, it was really tempting. This little village of snow, Teddy, he was saying the other day, and I'm going to let you explain more of this, how how much stuff was just in this one little area. And it was just like endlessly calling to climb this peak. We even named one peak next to us. It's kind of a round hump. We named it Gustav's Mound because we weren't sure he was ever going to come back from there. But explain the mountain fever. How you just anyone here who's your attraction to the mountains. We'll talk about some of the things in a bit, but you can mention any aspect because I think.
Yeah, so just driving into the mountains immediately, Tbilisi is already kind of in mountains, at least for my standards. So, I got a taste of that, but then driving into like the Greater Caucasus proper, just staring out the window basically the whole time because there's so much happening and it's so interesting and so beautiful. And I've kind of studied a little bit of geology, and so that's also very much something I hadn't experienced that much. Just overwhelming and beautiful, and there's trees everywhere, and it's autumn, so the trees are yellowing, and I could go on and on. And then the mountain fever. I just I saw some small shrines on small cliffs, and it's like I can kind of climb up there. There's like a slope. And I go up it, I go to the shrine, and it's like, okay, I had to do a little bit of clambering to get up there, and this is really nice, it's such a great peak. But there's peaks up higher, and, I got up here, so I can get up there. So I just started going, and I didn't stop, and I got to the top, and then I was like, okay, I will never get back down the same way, because it's just not possible. It's just rocks, and I will slip and die. Full stop. So I found a good, nice way to get back, but I hope nobody was too worried.
He slid down large chunks of the mountain. And in fact, he took you three with him today at the same place, and they had just such an easy time getting back.
Yes. We should have turned right, we turned left.
Yeah, but I got up to the top of the mountain, taking lots of breaks, especially, as I got towards the top, because it's just, I get so tired and the air is thinner, so it isn't that easy. And I got to the top, I realized I was tired, and I sort of sat down, and I slipped a little bit, and I was like, okay, but I moved, and it felt quite safe, and well, I'm tired, so I just started sliding down the mountain, and it's just grass up near the top. So
it's much faster than walking.
It's much faster, and it's much
More
easier.
you want, yeah.
Yeah, and it's much easier.
And it does something to one's clothes.
Let's not talk about it on YouTube.
We're not. I didn't mention any names.
My pants are fine.
I'm glad yours are. And my shoes, my shoes are kind of broken. So my shoe soles are more shiny than my upside of the shoe. So I decided to go barefoot on the hike.
Yeah.
Went quite well.
Simon, you didn't quite get mountain fever, but it was getting close at times.
I was a little bit sad we couldn't spend more time on the mountain itself. We climbed, we looked at the peak for such a long time that I would have loved to explore the top of the mountain more. And we kind of set, especially today, we set a very harsh time limit for ourselves, so we were kind of in a rush to go back and get lunch and meet the rest of the group. But it was amazing. It was incredible. I took lots of pictures. None of them are going to capture even a fraction of the beauty we saw up there. It's completely impossible. You need to come up here. You need to see this for yourself. It's untouched nature in every single direction. You see streams. You see rock formations. You see mineral deposits. It's a boundless source of interesting things to discover. So I feel like we only scratched the surface of what we could see here for sure.
Teddy, you're the one I could barely constrain, and we had some heated discussions about these things because he just saw those mountains. And the thing about the mountains here is they're not big rocks. You don't need technical ability. They're like humps that just are meadows that just go up and up and up. We're starting at about over 2,000 meters here, or close to 7,000 feet, and then you go up and up and up, and you're starting to go towards 8,000 feet when you get higher, or you're starting to go towards 2,500 meters in certain places we've been. So,
yeah, sure. So I had kind of experience for climbing mountains. And those here are very inviting. They're like calling for you. Ooh, look how close and beautiful on top of me. And you just like, you look at the route, and it's beautiful trees, and it's beautiful meadows, and it's like, okay, it's like, I'm going there, 2 hours, I'm on top. And it's just straightforward. And the idea is that mountains has very different element to them. Mountains, you see the place that you want to go really closely. It's not like looking at the sea or at the distance, because distance is very hard to see. It's like, okay, 30 kilometers over there, it could take me like 6 hours to get there. Mountains like I can see that place. It's 2 kilometers straight from me and I can go there. And you decide to go there and you suffer. And it's great. It's amazing. And the idea is that the mountains are covered with grass. And you think like, it's grass, it's great. But it's not the grass that somebody went with his mowing machine and it's like nice 2 centimeters that you can walk on and you feel you're barefoot. No, it's like clumps of grass like that, and you barely can step even on the rock itself. You're just stepping on grass upon grass, and it's just twisting your ankles. It's very difficult. You think like, oh, okay, so I'll go through the forest, and then you go to the forest, and the forest you cannot, because forest, they tend to compete with one tree with one another on real estate. So it's kind of unpassable between. It's very difficult. And you think, oh, the up is difficult, but down is also difficult. Yeah, you can slide, but it's also kind of dangerous in certain situations to do that. And so it was miserable to go up, to go down, but the misery stops when you get here, get your warm tea, and you sit down like, yes, that was an amazing climb. It was great. I will do it again tomorrow. And this is exactly what we did there every single day for the last 5 days. We suffered and sat here, and we'll gladly will do it tomorrow again. Unfortunately, we're returning. So this is our last day.
Well, yesterday we took kind of a collective hike in the Trousseau Gorge. And I let some of these guys get way ahead. I didn't quite get as far as they did. I'm 68 years old. They aren't. And but they also crossed some very strange terrain, abandoned villages for these guys. You saw the travertines, this strange calcium and mineral deposits and salt and such. Why don't you describe a little bit of that? And in fact, he didn't go the farthest. He got sick. We have a disease that's been going around. It's the same one I had at the beginning, although I think it's come from many different sources. But he just stopped and rested on the grass for a while, on top of the highest point of the trail.
Right, I just laid out on the grass near a cliff, and every now and then I would stand up and look over and watch the water go by, and then turn around and see a dog coming up or some cows, and watch people walk by and listen to what language they were speaking and try and guess where they were from.
But you said one time you were just starting to fall asleep and this dog walked right up to you.
Yeah.
And we've had this whole thing with dogs here. And maybe someone can give their observations on the local canine population.
There's a big dimorphism in the cities. They're extremely friendly, almost all like pets. In the village itself, most are also quite alright, but apparently the ones in the fields, which we have not encountered, they're more dangerous than the wolves here. So we always have to go hiking with a big stick to fight them off, but we didn't encounter any.
Simon and I ran into one dog that had been into a fight, had a big gash out of the side of its head. Its ears had been chewed.
Yes, I would say they were absent.
And he was hobbling badly, really just like hardly moving. And then we were followed by another dog who's also a village dog. And the funny thing about this dog is he's just kind of walking behind you, and you look at his face and you say, if this guy decides to go nuts, we're dead. Because he's just so... And then he was up here this morning, and he starts barking at these young children.
Yeah. I think there were 5 kids, and they were screaming as loud as they could, running by, and then they got to the gate, and they slammed it open and slammed it shut.
Into our property where we're staying. They hid from the dog. Same dog we were being followed by.
We were taking bets on whether it would cross the road to get into the village, because we thought there was a clear distinction and it was going to stay on one side of the road, but it just followed us all the way home, probably a kilometer or so.
Yeah, and just kind of padding behind us and going, just kind of making these kind of sounds. And but any more thoughts about yesterday's hike?
It was a very, it was a very geometrical experience, because it was like it was like just a straight valley. Like in the end, it was just a straight valley, and there's a river down the middle. There's mountains on both sides, and there's these really, really high mountains up ahead at the end of the valley, and that's kind of where we were walking towards. And then we turned our backs and just went back. And there's stuff along the way. There's lots of mineral water, springs, little rivers, streams. there's like this big pot where they collect the mineral water. No idea. Abandoned villages, like really abandoned ones. There was a monastery at the end, and just cows and sheep wandering about. There's no real fences, and yeah, it's just a real kind of remote location experience.
Some of the cows got really close to the edge of the cliff. It was like if you blew on them, they would just roll down.
Only made one mistake. We didn't set a time limit.
Yes.
Yes,
we
waiting.
weren't quite sure. I realized after a few hours that I'd forgotten to tell Teddy the time we should be back, which would give him, an hour a leeway on the other side, of course. Not early, never early.
Never really.
Obviously.
But we also went up to Gergeti, which is considered one of the most holy churches in Georgia, and it's high up on a cliff overlooking the town of Mtatsminda, which is a tourist destination. And we also went up to the Russian border, so everyone here saw Russia. They didn't go over the border, but they saw mountains that were in Russia. Any thoughts about all of those kinds of experiences?
There was a church at the border as well, and it was an interesting church. They had a green kind of marble-like material. I think you had a better word for it since you have looked into geology.
It was metamorphic rock.
Metamorphic rock.
But they treated it like marble.
Right.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And they made all kinds of different structures with this material. They had a little fountain and just different...
Some of the most beautiful picnic tables ever.
Yeah, the best picnic tables ever. And some benches made out of it, just all kinds of stuff.
It's kind of like a monumental watchtower and border post against Russia. Like a statement.
Yeah. Also, it's like the whole Georgian style of churches, from Orthodox churches, as I have understood them, is like they have like pictures at ground level, but as soon as you go 2 meters up, there is like nothing. You can just imagine like seeing God, but the pictures are like all on the ground level mostly.
Yeah, many of the Georgian churches are diametrically the opposite of a Protestant church, which is to say, Protestant church is pews, maybe a white roof or something. These would be dark, kind of octagonal shape. You walk inside, there are icons and candles, but if you look up, sometimes you look up and there's art, but sometimes you look up and it's just black from all the smoke and everything like that goes into it. And it's this sense of mystery that I know in the Protestant churches I've been to is always absent. And it's just not part of most Protestantism. But
Yeah, the one exception to that style was kind of the Blue Church we visited.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's one really interesting style of... you saw like the Georgian national mythos. You saw like the icon of the massacre of the 10,000 before the breach. No, the 100,000 before the breach. It was really interesting because I understood that only after I talked to Peter about the importance of this breach for this nation. So it was really interesting.
Gergeti, anyone?
I was tempted to go up to Mount Kazbeki. I definitely was tempted. It probably not took me 2 days.
He was so tempted. We're talking about a mountain with like about 2,000 or 3,000 meters or more, covered in snow, with just sheer rock. This is not your friendly grass mountain here anymore. This is a mountain that's 5,000 meters, 15,000 feet high, and he's saying, I want to go there.
Yeah, I remember me and Jill were looking at the sign, like, okay, we kind of calculated, like, okay, that's like 8 kilometers, 10 kilometers, and we look at the sign, like, you need to have helmets, ropes, shoes with spikes. Like looking at Jill, like they're exaggerating, you know, those kind of stuff.
Okay. Any thoughts on Mtatsminda?
Very bad roads.
Extremely bad.
Very bad roads.
We did eat at a nice kind of what was it called? My Object.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it was the name of a small. It was a typical Georgian restaurant, but we were surprised that they had quite good food, considering that they looked like it would just be some sort of tourist place.
And I don't think there was anybody there when we arrived. Maybe 1, 2 people.
Yeah, it looked like they had like 2 or 3 dishes, but they had a full menu. Let's talk about our favorite food experience. And this was in the town of Arsha, which is down at the end of the road here. You turn left. And it was at a restaurant that, as far as I know, is just called Restaurant. But yet, that was one of our favorite experiences, eating Georgian food. Extremely good, well made. I would say for just pure Georgian food, as opposed to what Mishiko was doing up in Mtatsminda, this was the best Georgian meal we'd had. And I think we all kind of agreed on that. Not only that, Teddy was really grateful that they brought the food almost instantly, where we waited at least an hour in one place, didn't we? Yeah. And so, thoughts? Food?
We weren't sure whether we were going to find a table at the beginning.
Yeah.
They seemed to turn us away, but not really. And when we talked to them a little bit more, they let us in, and they said, try. So we tried to find a table, and it was there, and so we found a table. Fantastic. And yeah, the food was excellent, and the service was really good as well.
Yeah, everything was extremely fresh, extremely hot, warm to the touch.
Yeah, and surprisingly, we kind of got accustomed to the way that they serve. So we ordered much more correctly this time. We ordered enough for everybody to share, everybody to have its own kind of meal. So we learned the culture of serving in Georgia, which also helped to make the food much better.
It had a lot of interesting Georgian cookbooks as well that I enjoyed looking through as we were waiting for the food. It's a very good place.
Okay, before we come to our conclusions and everyone kind of sums up what some of the things that this trip has meant to them, what do you think of the village of Snow?
I think it's, and I know that other people probably agree with me, I think it's probably quite a miserable place in winter. But in the summertime it's lovely. And it's got these unique, I'm pretty sure they're unique, we haven't seen them anywhere else, but they just take the rock from the mountainside and they build their houses and the walls, kind of fences, walls around their houses with them in these very almost these standardized patterns, which are patterns. So it looks like a patterned wall, and then you take a closer look and you realize it's just rock from the nearby mountainside, and it's special.
Kids, you must have a really wonderful childhood. We were on the shrine on the hilltop and we looked down and we saw these 2 kids on donkey backs chasing a little dog, and all these kids around and beating the donkeys with sticks to make them go faster. Yeah.
And there are lots of children in general. You see them all over the place.
Young children.
Going down hills.
And today a few of us were walking by a cohort of them, and they all go, hello! And like they're using all of their English.
I think there were 2 words, hello and sorry.
And excuse me.
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
No, we saw, with whom we walked and saw kids driving a car. It's like, I'm looking like, what? It's like a 9-year-old and like a bunch of his friends and they're like driving a car.
Yeah.
They were at the time of their life.
Yeah. Oh, this is life. It's so much more magical than mine was, at least.
Yeah, so maybe miserable in the winter, but I think the kids still enjoy it.
Definitely.
And it's a living village, and the kids show that. It's not just old people.
I think it's a problem when you get to teenhood. It's much problem. I experienced in Israel the same problem. Like I grew up in a very small village, it was great, but when you get to this 12, 13, 14, yeah, and you kind of want something a bit different. And I think this is, I didn't see any teens here.
Right.
Right, and I guess you need that. So, who knows, maybe they're sitting on their computer playing Fortnite.
Whatever the kids play.
Whatever the kids playing these
Right,
days,
right.
exactly.
Donkey Kong.
Donkey beating.
Yeah. And there were other things we did here. We went up and saw the heads that are up over here. I think they're the heads of bishops. And then we got stuck at trying to get up to Juta, where I thought we would all go. And there were some guys there saying the road was closed, but they would take us up for 50 lari each. And each car, or was it each? Whatever.
Like that.
Anyway, extortion, but I think they meant it, but at the same time, we wouldn't do it. But and I'm sure there's all sorts of little things. We found ourselves going to the babushka, we called her, which is this little store in the middle of the town, the village here, and I commented to Teddy, if we were here for longer, the longer we stay, the more that would be the center of the city, this village for us,
And we saw little kids coming over to grab some groceries today and get a candy from the babushka. It's definitely a center of activity, but not just for us, but for the village as well.
Mm-hmm. So, let's talk about. Wrap it up and talk about what has this whole experience meant to you, and you can say it as few or more words as you wish.
Georgia is a really wonderful country, but I love most was just the people being bundled together with 7 people for all these days, and like every single day, every moment, it's difficult to get stuff done because there's so many interesting conversations happening everywhere, and I've never had it before.
Really?
Not so much, not so long.
Right. Yeah. Would you see this as an extension of what happened last year in Landau in some way?
Yeah, more intensive. Yeah, more intense.
I would just double what Peter just said. I have nothing more to add, really. Same, very same.
How did the conversations, how do you feel it meshed with the more cultural side of things in the city and up here, the more natural side, mixed with all those conversations?
I'll be honest, I found that even in the city I did really have good conversation with all these fine gentlemen, but also the walking around in the mountains was fine.
But you're probably right, the background, not the background, this wonderful country was very conducive probably to the conversations, definitely. Yeah.
It wouldn't be the same if we were sitting down to
Exactly.
have McDonald's,
Yeah,
for example.
Yeah,
Right.
Precisely.
Yeah. Also, we got actually to say the little taste of the Book of Bell. So they presented to us.
I read part of my book, Legendary, The 5 Masters of Reality, which I might get self-published this year, so. And I think at least 1 or 2 people here might buy one.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
So,
And you should too as well, by the way.
Yeah. Well.
but what do you think?
I have some of the same thoughts that y'all had, but it was also an experience of traveling out from where I'm from, going somewhere new, and just seeing the different perspectives everybody here had. Everybody has a different background, and the country itself has a very different background from where I'm from. It's interesting to see those elements come together and how they just changed our conversations. And similar to what y'all have said, it's probably the most intense conversations I've had in my life, like back to back to back.
I think that many of you have traveled, experienced like getting out of your normal day-to-day patterns and conversations opening up because of that. But I think there was more here, much more. I noticed a lot of the conversations circled around not going with the stream of the culture and creating our own path in life and in relationships and friendship and all these things. And I think seeing the example of Georgia as a very unique place definitely helped us spark some of those conversations and gave us something to circle around. And that's what the writing of conversation made it more meaningful for all of us, at least it did for me.
I will echo and summarize, I guess, what the guy said, because my purpose to come here wasn't Georgia, although that was the invitation. My purpose here to be part of the continuation of the conversation that I started last year in London. I enjoyed it so much, it was so impactful on me this year that I said I want to continue that. And I still see us as a colleague of a certain institution of studying of correct way to live our life and just in general the lives of other people as well, and maybe we can teach them how to live that life better after we'll figure this out by ourselves. And this kind of collective of colleagues, this is the way that we meet. We don't meet in big halls in some convention in LA. We meet in weird places because the places, these weird places that are filled with culture, is the setting for a conversation. As Simon pointed correctly, this kind of the conversation are different because of the setting, and they are making the conversation more alive and giving it a backbone and also a background of how the conversations will go and should flow and infuse it with meaning. I think we can also make a meaningful conversation sitting in McDonald's, but it adds something. It adds to the conversation. What exactly? It's very hard for me, but this is kind of also my life work to understand how it's kind of what setting should be a good conversation, a good conversation in what setting it should be happening and how it should be conducted. So I thank you all for coming and sharing this experience with me, and just it will be very important for me, and I will remember it and will tell stories about it for other people, and will try to invite them to do something meaningful with their own life. We'll invite some friends to visit some weird place and climb mountains with them.
Exactly, that is the point. And part of this does come from my original time spent at L'Abri in Wemo, in a little village in Switzerland. And part of what got me just thinking when I first got there was going up the side of the mountain on this bus, up 1,000 meters, and looking off at these massive mountains. And it's just something about that just starts you thinking. And again, these are not the kind of things you can quantify, but nevertheless, I'm sure they're real. And so bringing people to a place like Georgia, bringing people up to the Caucasus Mountains, it's just, and especially as all of you have proven, crossing this ocean in some cases, coming across the continent of Europe, coming up from Israel, coming from different backgrounds and places. And we're nobody in the sense of the grand scheme of things. We're just people who come here to meet. And yet we are somebody. We're real people who have real ideas. And each person can do something. And what you're saying is exactly what my hope is that someone can take this little idea of inviting people to come together to talk, to think, to especially considering what our cultures are going through at the moment. The temptation towards this monoculture of just technology and endless entertainment that has no particular substance. but I think we have found some substance here, and that's what we're sharing. So I would like to thank you all for coming, and it means a lot to me. So there it is. Thank you from Tbilisi, Georgia, and let's give them a good Gaumarjos as a cheer with our empty little cups. Gaumarjos.
Gaumarjos.
Yes. And Drobit, we will meet again. And there will be another video on this, more of the images and such. And I've got a lot of images, but I'm going to borrow some from them and put it together so you can actually see more of what we're doing. So.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.